I sometimes wonder, what damage will this cigarette or bidi do? Will this be the one that causes a stroke that makes me a burden on my family? Or will it start lung cancer growth? Will this cause mouth cancer or heart disease? Or bring emphysema closer? Next time you reach for your cigarette or bidi pack, ask yourself, what damage will this cigarette or bidi do? Quit tobacco today. For help, call 1-800-112356 or give a missed call on 011-22901701.
Smoking is injurious to health. Smoking causes cancer. धूम्रपान स्वास्थ्य के लिए हानिकारक है. धूम्रपान कर्क रोग का कारण है.
মাঝে মাঝে তব দেখা পাই কেন মেঘ আসে এ হৃদয় আকাশে তোমারে দেখিতে দেখিতে দেয় না মাঝে মাঝে তব দেখা পাই.
On the midnight of 15th August 1947, India raised its flag high. India attained freedom. The struggle for a free India began long ago. In a radio broadcast from Tokyo, Raj Bihari Bose, one of the founders of the Indian National Army (INA) and the Indian Independence League, proclaimed, "This is a salute to him to whose inspiring call owes the birth of positive Indian nationalism. Sri Aurobindo is the foremost of those seers of Indian nationalism. I salute you, Sri Aurobindo. Bande Mataram."
आखिर में मैं खुदा से दुआ मांगता हूँ कि वो हमारी फौज को आशीर्वाद दे और आने वाली सख्त लड़ाई में पूरी पूरी फतेह बख्शे.
During his undergraduate days in Presidency College, Calcutta, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose was greatly inspired by Sri Aurobindo. He writes, "Aurobindo Ghosh was easily the most popular leader in Bengal, a fearless advocate of independence. A mixture of spirituality and politics had given him the halo of mysticism and made his personality more fascinating. Aurobindo Ghosh is my spiritual guru. To him and to his mission, I have dedicated my mind and soul."
When Sri Aurobindo openly became a part of the freedom movement, he spoke to the students of the Bengal National College, of which he was the founder principal. His message to them is a message to the youth of India for all times.
The time has now arrived for our motherland, when nothing is dearer than her service. If you will study, study for her sake. Train yourselves, body and mind and soul, for her service. You will earn your living so that you may live for her sake. You will go abroad to foreign lands that you may do service to her. Work that she may prosper, suffer that she may rejoice. All is contained in that one single advice.
The London Times says, he took a leading part in founding the extremist paper Bande Mataram. He was arrested on charge for sedition and detained in Alipur jail for trial. The proceedings against him dragged on for a year and brought a decisive change in his conceptions of his life's purpose. Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore offered his salutations to Sri Aurobindo.
অরবিন্দ রবীন্দ্রের লহ নমস্কার। হে বন্ধু, হে দেশ বন্ধু, স্বদেশ আত্মার বাণী মূর্তি তুমি। তোমা লাগি নহে মান, নহে ধন, নহে সুখ, কোনো ক্ষুদ্র দান চাহ নাই, কোনো ক্ষুদ্র কৃপা। ভিক্ষা লাগি বাড়াওনি আতুর অঞ্জলি। আছো জাগি পরিপূর্ণতার তরে সর্ববাধাহীন। যার লাগি নরদেব চিররাত্রি দিন তপমগ্ন, যার লাগি কবি বজ্ররবে গেয়েছেন মহাগীত, মহাবীর সবে গিয়েছেন সংকট যাত্রায়, যার কাছে আরাম লজ্জিত শির নত করিয়াছে, মৃত্যু ভুলিয়াছে ভয়, সেই বিধাতার শ্রেষ্ঠ দান। আপনার পূর্ণ অধিকার চেয়েছ দেশের হয়ে অকুণ্ঠ আশায়, সত্যের গৌরব দৃপ্ত প্রদীপ্ত ভাষায়, অখণ্ড বিশ্বাসে।
Muzaffarpur. This was a European club. On 30th April 1908 at around 8:30 p.m., there was a loud explosion. Those who threw a bomb were accurate, but they were mistaken in the identity of their target. Khudiram Bose, along with Prafullo Chaki, attempted to assassinate British magistrate Douglas Kingsford by throwing a bomb on the carriage they suspected Kingsford was in. Kingsford derived great pleasure from whipping and torturing revolutionaries and was nicknamed the Butcher of Lal Bazar. Khudiram was arrested after he walked 25 miles to Waini, which is now known as the Khudiram Bose Pusa railway station. This is that spot. Khudiram was sentenced to death. He walked to the gallows firmly and cheerfully and continued to smile as a black cap was drawn over his head. At the time of his hanging, Khudiram was 18 years, 8 months, and 11 days old. It was here at Mukama that Prafullo Chaki fatally shot himself before he could be arrested. But what was the source of the bomb? Joshidi is a railway station that connects Deoghar in Jharkhand to other cities. It was the beginning of 1908. Barendra Kumar Ghosh, Sri Aurobindo's younger brother, along with Ulhashkar Datto, Prafullo Kumar Chakraborty, Vibhuti Bhushan Sarkar, and Nalinikanto Gupta, all revolutionaries were preparing to make a bomb. Now, one afternoon, the five headed to this secluded Dighiria hill to test. And the bomb did burst. But the splinter hit Prafullo Chakraborty and he died on the spot. In the midst of all this, there appears a central figure, Barindra Kumar Ghosh. I stand today at that sacred place. Several years later, Charles Taggart, who headed the detective department, went to the cellular jail to record some confessions. His report confirmed that the mastermind behind the revolutionary movement was Borokorta, chief commander. There are strong reasons to believe that Borokorta was none other than Barindra's Shejda, his elder brother Aurobindo Ghosh.
शहीदों के खून अजिए पुकारा उठाए जंगी नारा
शहीदों के खून अजिए पुकारा उठाए जंगी नारा
डर के मारे चौक उठा ल अंग्रेजी सरकार
डर के मारे चौक उठा अंग्रेजी सरकार
तो 2 मई 1908 सन सुबह 5:30 पुलिस सुपरडिरेक्टर साहब मोरलो छप्पाओ के घर लेकर हाथ में सरज वारंट ढूंढलो घर दफ्तर
लेकर हाथ में सरज वारंट ढूंढलो घर दफ्तर सरज के नाम पे देखो बबुआ का हो खेला ई का हो खेला
जैसन कमल बान में बौरा हाथी मचैला अपना खेला
जैसन कमल बान में बौरा हाथी मचैले अपना खेला ई का हो खेला ई का हो खेला
पूछो सबूत ना मिलो खास बगैर चिट्ठी अखबार कागजात और किताब बिगड़ लो साहब का दिमाग बड़ी डांट लो उनके खिलाफ
का हो खेला ई का हो खेला
अचानक एक सिपाही का मिलन मिट्टी का एक ढेला
अचानक एक सिपाही का मिलन मिट्टी का एक ढेला
साहब सोच लो ई जरूर भइले बम का मसाला
साहब सोच लो ई जरूर भइले बम का मसाला
ओ साहब डर गइले पुलिस डर गइले बा सरकार
आजादी के जंग के आगे डर गइले सरकार
हमर के
आजादी के जंग के आगे डर गइले सरकार
पर वो तो था दक्षिणेश्वर धाम का पवित्र मिट्टी जो लाए थे पूजन के लिए वही मिट्टी से अंग्रेज डर गई लेवा
का हो खेला ई का हो खेला
डर के मारे चीखे ट्रेगो ओकरा के कमर पे लगाओ रस्सी और ले चलो लाल बाजार
का हो खेला ई का हो खेला
अरे बिना वारंट सबके बजाए
कर लो रे गिरफ्तार कर लो रे गिरफ्तार कर लो रे गिरफ्तार कर लो रे गिरफ्तार
फिर तक कमिश्नर हॉलिडे साहब हुक्म कर लो ओकरा के अभी भर दो जेल कोई न मिला उनसे बात न करम भेजो सल्टन से अंग्रेजी कानून वही करल ओकर भेजल जेल
अंग्रेजी कानून वही करल ओकर भेजल जेल
आलीपुर के सल्टन सेल भैया सालीटारी सेल
आलीपुर के सलिटरी सेल भैया सालीटारी सेल आलीपुर के सलिटरी सेल भैया सालीटारी सेल
Aurobindo Ghosh was sent to this solitary cell in Alipur jail on the 5th of May 1908. Now, these cells were designed to break the spirit of the prisoners. If only the walls could speak, you'd hear him.
My solitary cell was 9 feet long and 5 feet in width. It had no windows. In front stood strong iron bars. This cage was my appointed abode. One plate and bowl used to adorn the courtyard. If one pressed one's fingers a little hard on the plate's surface, it would start flying in a circle, like the whirling dervishes of Arabia. While whirling, it would attempt to slip away with the incomparable grub provided by the prison authorities. But more dear and useful than the plate was my dear multi-purpose bowl. It helped in the act of ablution. Later, with the same bowl, I gargled, bathed. A little later, took the lentil soup or vegetable soup that was poured into the same container. I drank water out of it and washed my mouth. Such an all-purpose, priceless object can be had only in a British prison. During rain and thunder, thanks to the violent Tandava Nritya, dance of the strong wind, a small-scale flood would take place inside my little room. After that, there was no alternative but to rush to a corner with a wet blanket. The only dry areas were near the WC, but one did not feel like placing the blankets there.
This is the cell. I acquired an unsought lesson in controlling my sense of disgust. The entire procedure for defecation seems to have been oriented towards the art of self-control. 2 baskets with tar coating would be kept in the room itself. The sweeper would clean it up in the mornings and afternoons, but if one went to the privy at odd hours, as penance, one had to put up with the noxious and fetid smell. The British administration was greatly afraid, anxious and nervous. Lieutenant Governor of Bengal, Sir Andrew Fraser, wrote to the Governor General of India, Lord Minto, about Sri Aurobindo. He is not quite sane. He is a leader. He is regarded and spoken by all, but he has kept himself like a careful and untouched general out of sight of the enemy.
People from all walks of life came together to raise funds for the defense of Sri Aurobindo. There appears to be no likelihood of the Alipore bomb case coming to a close in the course of the present year. The prosecuting counsel, Mr. Norton, will therefore have a merry time of it, for he will get the princely sum of rupees 1,000 per diem. In its 18th July 1908 issue, the Boshumati published the following. Bengalis, if you have any heart, come forward to help Aurobindo. Srimati Swarna Kumari Devi has given rupees 100. Among the contributors is a blind beggar and a poor schoolboy. The boy used to spend 2 pice every day for his lunch, and he has been denying himself the daily necessity and paying the amount to Aurobindo Defense Fund.
The Sessions Court trial began on 20th October 1908. At first, his mind was greatly perturbed at being dragged from the silence of solitary confinement to the noise of the world outside. He wrote,
There was a small platoon of European surgeons who went along, and they all carried loaded pistols. At the time of our getting into the carriage, a band of armed policemen stood guard and did some marching behind the carriage, and the ritual was repeated at the time of getting down as well.
Beechcroft আসছে
All right. Vande Mataram! Vande Mataram! Vande Mataram! Vande Mataram! Vande Mataram!
Silence! Silence, please!
দেশে Thank you. In the case of the Emperor versus Aurobindo Ghosh and Associates, the counsel for the prosecution, Mr. Yardley Norton, may now make his remarks.
Your Honor, this case is as clear as crystal. I invite reference to exhibit number 295, otherwise known as the Sweets letter. In this letter, Baron Ghosh writes to the main conspirator of the entire affair, Mr. Aurobindo Ghosh, where he clearly states, "Dear brother, now is the time. Please try to make arrangements so that we can all meet at our conference. We must have sweets, ready-made for emergency. I wait here for your answer." Sweets, Your Honor, is a mere euphemism for bombs. Another principal accused, Hemchandra, is the man who has put together all these coded messages. He is the one who has learnt the formula for making these bombs. Baron Ghosh, in seeking the advice of Aurobindo Ghosh, has proved without any element of doubt that Aurobindo Ghosh was the main conspirator, the mastermind behind this entire operation to assassinate Mr. Kingsford. Your Honor, the extremists were so elated that they didn't know what to say. But before going into that, I would like to place on record exhibit number 239. This, under the heading Marriage Expenditure, has an item RIV, $52. It's a code name, Your Honor, for revolver. There is another item listed in the same section which says bridegroom. And this, Your Honor, was actually the victim, Mr. Kingsford. I would like to remind Your Honor that these extremists are so elated with what they think has been a wonderful victory that they want this spread throughout the land, and they want the same action perpetrated throughout the country. How can we ever allow something like that?
During his detention in the prison, Aurobindo Ghosh's life underwent a major transformation. He recounts,
During the 1 year's imprisonment, human relations would cease. I'd have to live like an animal in a cage. But it would be more appropriate to speak of a year's living in a forest, in an ashram or hermitage. The British prison was the ashram. The only result of the wrath of the British government was that I found God. For the first time among the thieves, robbers, and killers, in human body I could realize the divine presence. When I would return to the world of activity, it would not be the same old familiar Aurobindo Ghosh. Rather, it would be a new being, a new character, intellect, life, mind, embarking upon a new course of action that would come out of the ashram at Alipur.
Lauren, he has turned approval.
We continue our hearing of our case, the Emperor versus Aurobindo Ghosh and Associates. Mr. Norton, you may begin your questioning of the witness for the prosecution.
Please answer in the affirmative or the negative, that is, ha or na. Do you understand? Huh? Do you have any information about the criminal activities of Aurobindo Ghosh to give this court? Huh. Would you say that Aurobindo Ghosh is the mastermind behind the dacoities that have happened in recent times perpetrated by the revolutionaries?
Huh. Silence! Silence! Please do not disrupt the proceedings. Counsel, please continue.
Is Aurobindo Ghosh the person referred to as Barakarta? And is Aurobindo Ghosh the person that all the revolutionaries in the country refer to as Barakarta?
কি বলছে এসব মিথ্যে মিথ্যে কথা দ্যাটস আ লাই এসব চাষি দেব মিথ্যাবাদী
Please!
And is his brother Baron Ghosh referred to as Chota Karta?
Huh.
Your Honor, I would like to inform you that Aurobindo Ghosh is treated with the reverence of a king wherever he goes. In fact, he's regarded not merely as the leader of Bengal, but as the leader of the entire country.
Now, fearing for the safety of Narendra Goshain, the prison authorities shifted him to the jail hospital. Kanailal Dotto and Shotten Bose pretended to be sick and got transferred here too. Night, jail, hospital. Kanailal Dotto and Shotten Bose smuggled in 2 revolvers. They trapped Naren Gosain at the jail hospital. Naren is shot at.
Kanai and Satyan were awarded the death sentence. Kanai was hanged in the early morning of 10th November 1908. Eyewitness reports say he was serene in his final days. On the eve of his execution, he slept soundly. He woke up at 4 a.m., took a bath, and finished his prayers. Then he read from the Gita and the Bhagavatam. At 6 in the morning, he walked briskly to the gallows and stood firm, erect and fearless, as the noose was placed around his neck. A quiet smile remained on his lips. He had offered his life for his motherland. He was just 20 years old.
It is said that he objected to the hangman adjusting the neck rope and put it on himself with wonderful calmness and fortitude. His face brightened up with a serene smile.
An Englishman who witnessed the hanging later asked Barin, "How many more do you have like him?"
The scenes at the cremation of Kanai, who was hanged yesterday for the assassination of Gosain, the approver, were unimaginable. The body was carried through the streets with the face uncovered, and there were thousands who pressed around the cortege, while Parda women followed in closed carriages.
A large crowd of mourners, numbering over 10,000, some 50% of whom were women, were eager to see the face. The body was cremated entirely in ghee and sandalwood. It was brought to the notice of the authorities that certain extremists intended to outflank the order of the government with regard to the cremation of Satyendra. Section 144 was imposed and the police all night was busy posting this notice.
There were two very different sides to Sri Aurobindo's life and detention in the prison. One was visible for all to see, and the other known only to Sri Aurobindo. While the world outside buzzed with news, rumors, interpretations, and concerns, Sri Aurobindo remained unattached, absorbed deep within himself, experiencing the truths of Indian spirituality. He felt God fulfills several aims through a single event. He realized yoga could conquer weakness, that mental poise and reliance on Mangalmaya could not be affected even by years of solitude. Sri Aurobindo recounts, while meditating in the prison, Swami Vivekananda came to him.
I was constantly hearing the voice of Vivekananda speaking to me for a fortnight in the jail. The voice spoke on an important field of spiritual experience. I felt Vivekananda's presence. He went on teaching me about the working of the higher consciousness, the truth consciousness.
Swami Vivekananda had once declared, "The history of the world is the history of a few men who had faith in themselves." There's one word that you find coming out like a bomb from the Upanishads, bursting like a bombshell upon masses of ignorance. It is the word fearlessness. Sri Aurobindo had become totally fearless.
Mr. Norton, you may proceed.
The prosecution would like to place as evidence the personal letters of Aurobindo Ghosh to his wife, Mrinalini. In these letters, he talks about madness. He is not a normal person. I present Exhibit 299 by 9. In this personal letter from Aurobindo Ghosh to Mrinalini, he talks about his madnesses.
My first one is this. I firmly believe that the accomplishments, genius, higher education, and learning and wealth that God has given me are His. My second madness, by whatever means, I must have the direct vision of God. My third madness is that while others look upon their countries as an inert piece of matter, a few meadows and fields, forests and hills and rivers, I look upon my country as the mother. I worship her and adore her. This feeling is not new in me. It is not of today. I was born with it. It is in my very marrow. God sent me to earth to accomplish this great mission.
While confined within the cell walls, Sri Aurobindo realized God's omnipresence and that Shraddha, faith, and Atma Samarpan, a self-surrender, were the road to perfection.
Thanks to my experience of these 12 months, I have been able to return to the world of action with tenfold hope, with a greater understanding of India's greatness, with redoubled respect of human character, the future progress and well-being of the motherland and the human race. Then something happened which I had not expected. The arrangements which had been made for my defense were suddenly changed, and another counsel stood there to defend me. He was there unexpectedly, a friend of mine, but I did not know he was coming. You have all heard the name of this man who put away from him all other thoughts and abandoned all his practice, who sat up half the night, day after day, for months, and broke his health to save me, Srijut Chittaranjan Das.
Mr. Das, you may begin your concluding remarks.
Thank you, sir. May I, Your Honor, sum up my arguments? I would like to quote from a statement made by Sri Aurobindo Ghosh. If to aspire to independence or to preach freedom for one's country is a crime, then I am a criminal and let me be punished. There is nothing in the prosecution's arguments nor any evidence to establish that my respected client, Sri Aurobindo Ghosh, was in any way involved in the Muzaffarpur bombing incident. Nor is there anything that points to his being a principal conspirator or a mentor to those who have been labeled as extremists. The so-called incriminating letter is a forgery manufactured by the prosecution and the police. My appeal to you, Your Honor, is that a man like this, who has such offenses imputed to him, stands not just before the bar of this court, but that he stands before the High Court of history. Long after this controversy is hushed in silence, long after all this turmoil and agitation has ceased, long after he is dead and gone, he will be remembered as a poet of patriotism, as the prophet of nationalism, and a lover of humanity. The time has come for you, sir, to consider your judgment, and for you, gentlemen, to consider your verdict.
This was the courtroom. It was one of the biggest trials of the time. The documents filed numbered over 400 pages. The exhibits, bombs, revolvers, and many others numbered over 300, and the prosecution examined over 200 witnesses.
মনে হচ্ছে পিচক্রফট আজ জাজমেন্ট দেবেন।
হ্যাঁ, দেখা যাক।
I now come to the case of Aurobindo Ghosh, the most important accused in the case. He is the accused whom more than any other the prosecution are anxious to have convicted, and but for his presence in the dock, there is no doubt that the case would have been finished long ago. It is for that reason that I have left his case till the last, and also because the case against him depends to a very great extent, in fact almost entirely, upon his association with other accused persons. The defense has hailed him as a revolutionary and a philosopher. Mr. Das argues that the idea is the same as that has been elaborated by European philosophers, that a government cannot exist against the will of the people. Now, what then are the chief points against Aurobindo? In the letters, we have had the ambiguous references to the movement requiring unlimited money. Now, considering the entire evidence, the association with several accused, the letters and telegrams exchanged, letters which were not addressed to Aurobindo Ghosh, or a piece of scribbling found in an old notebook in his house, I should hesitate before saying that his complicity in the conspiracy can be considered established on these facts submitted by the prosecution. In his favor, we have the fact that he has in the columns of the Mande Materum deprecated violence. Well, the point is whether his writings and speeches, which in themselves seem to advocate nothing more than the regeneration of his country, taken with the facts proved against him in this case, are sufficient to show that he was a member of the conspiracy. And taking all the evidence together, I am of opinion that it falls short of such proof as would justify me in finding him guilty of so serious a crime.
At 10 o'clock, 500 men, comprising armed and military police, were patrolling the many roads and by-lanes leading from the jail to the court. Within half a mile radius of the court, the roads were practically impassable.
Sri Aurobindo thanked all those who stood by him and worked for his release through a letter in the Amrita Bajar Patrika.
I attribute my escape to the protection of the mother of all of us, who has never been absent from me, but always held me in her arms and shielded me from grief and disaster. It is the love of my country which led me into danger, and it is also the love of my countrymen which has brought me safe through it.
The Modern Review wrote, Aurobindo was the one who rode the whirlwind and directed the storm. He was the one who alone among Indian politicians displayed no nervous hesitation to claim freedom in the widest sense of the term. His 1 year's seclusion in jail has deepened the strength of his faith and has brightened, not quenched, the fire of his zeal. He is like gold, thrice tested in fire.
Sri Aurobindo was released from jail on the 6th of May 1909. He had been in prison for exactly 1 year, and 24 days after his release, Sri Aurobindo was at Uttarpara. Here he shared his inner spiritual awakening and experience in the prison cell.
When I was asked to speak to you, it was my intention to say a few words. I do not know now whether I shall fulfill that intention. I have to speak to the whole of the Indian nation. When I went to jail, the whole country was alive with the cry of Bande Mataram. At the prison, a voice came to me from within. Wait and see. Then he placed the Gita in my hands. His strength entered into me, and I was able to do the sadhana of the Gita. I was not only to understand intellectually, but to realize what Sri Krishna demanded of Arjuna and what he demands of those who aspire to do his work.
Sri Aurobindo expressed his realizations while in jail.
The Sanatan Dharma is life itself. It is a thing that has not so much to be believed as lived. I looked at the jail that secluded me from men, and it was no longer by its high walls that I was imprisoned. No, it was Vasudeva who surrounded me. I walked under the branches of the tree in front of my cell, but it was not the tree. I knew it was Vasudeva. It was Sri Krishna whom I saw standing there and holding over me his shade. I looked at the bars of my cell, the very grating that did duty for a door, and again I saw Vasudeva. It was Narayana who was guarding and standing sentry over me. I looked at the prisoners in the jail, the thieves, the murderers, the swindlers, and as I looked at them, I saw Vasudeva. It was Narayana whom I found in these darkened souls and misused bodies. When the case opened, I looked, and it was not the magistrate whom I saw. It was Vasudeva. It was Narayana who was sitting there on the bench. I looked at the prosecuting counsel, and it was not the counsel for the prosecution that I saw. It was Sri Krishna. It was my lover and friend who sat there and smiled. Now do you fear? He said, I am in all men, and I overrule their actions and their words.
With Krishna by his side, there was no place for any fear. Otherwise, with death staring in the face, how could he compose such a poem? With wind and the weather beating around me, up to the hill and the moorlands I go, who will come with me? Who will climb with me? Wade through the brook and tramp through the snow. Not in the petty circle of cities cramped by your doors and your walls I dwell. Over me, God is blue in the welkin. Against me, the wind and the storm rebel. I sport with solitude here in my regions of misadventure have made me a friend. Who would live largely? Who would live freely? Here to the windswept uplands ascend. I am the Lord of tempest and mountain. I am the spirit of freedom and pride. Stark must he be, and a kinsman to danger, who shares my kingdom and walks at my side.
The British government found itself in a quandary. Sri Aurobindo was discussed in the British Parliament and even roused a feeling of admiration from some of the leaders, including Mr. Keir Hardie, the founder of the Labour Party, and Mr. James Ramsay MacDonald, who later became the Prime Minister of Great Britain. Mr. MacDonald raised several questions related to Sri Aurobindo and the handling of his case by the British government. The exchange of mails between Lord Minto, the Viceroy and Governor-General of India, and Lord Morley, the Secretary of State for India, bear testimony. Lord Minto wrote to Lord Morley on the 14th of April 1910, I have been somewhat dismayed by the questions in the House of Commons about Aurobindo Ghosh. He is the most dangerous man we have to deal with at present, and he has great influence with the student class. I believe every effort has been made by his Indian friends to reclaim him, and they tell me it is hopeless. Lord Morley responded, As to the famous Aurobindo, you are mistaken if you think that there is any sympathy with him at home. That is not the point. The point is, in my mind, the institution of proceedings against him was a foolish blunder from the side of policy.
The British government was frustrated. Sri Aurobindo had been found not guilty and released by the court, and he was not to be found. He just disappeared. Lord Minto wrote to Lord Morley. In the meanwhile, Aurobindo is in Pondicherry, where he seems to have formed some undesirable French connections and will probably sail for France. The transformed Sri Aurobindo was indeed in Pondicherry.
I heard the Adesh, go to Pondicherry. I could not question. It was Sri Krishna's Adesh. Later I discovered it was for the ashram work, for the yogic work.
On 15th August 1947, India attained her independence. On its eve, the 14th August, Sri Aurobindo was invited by All India Radio to give a message to the nation. He said that August 15th was his own birthday, and he took this not as a fortuitous coincidence, but as the sanction and seal of the divine force on his work. He spoke of his 5 dreams, of a free and united India where the partition and division had to go, of the resurgence and liberation of the peoples of Asia, of a world union, of a fairer, brighter, and nobler life for all mankind, of the spiritual gift of India to the world, and finally, of a step in evolution which would raise man to a higher and larger consciousness.
Sri Aurobindo gave his vision of a new India and the role it had to play in the future. This is what he said.
August 15th, 1947 is the birthday of free India. It marks for her the end of an old era, the beginnings of a new age. But we can also make it by our life and acts as a free nation, an important date in a new age opening for the whole world, for the political, social, cultural, and spiritual future of humanity.